Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Cheryl Yuen. Here's a look at our top stories tonight. President Xi Jinping holds historic meeting with U.S. counterpart Joe Biden. Hong Kong government demands thorough investigation after protest song mistaken as national anthem during a rugby tournament. And Turkey blames separatists for launching terrorist attack, which left 6 dead and dozens injured. President Xi Jinping held a historic meeting with U.S. leader Joe Biden on the sidelines of the G20 summit today. Both admitted relations between Beijing and Washington are far from ideal and expressed hopes for open dialogue. Winna Wang reports.
This was the long-anticipated handshake. On the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia, Joe Biden spoke face-to-face with Xi Jinping for the first time since he became president in 2020. It comes at a time of soaring tensions between Beijing and Washington over Taiwan, continued intellectual and trade wars, and their differing approaches to the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
I believe there's a little substitute, though, to face-to-face discussions. And as you know, I'm committed to keeping the lines of communications open between you and me personally, but our governments across the board, because our two countries have so much that we have an opportunity to deal with. As the leaders of our two nations, we share responsibility, in my view, to show that China and the United States can manage our differences, prevent competition from becoming anything ever near conflict, and to find ways to work together on urgent global issues that require our mutual cooperation.
Currently, Sino-U.S. relations are in such a state that inspires great interest, said Xi. It is not in the fundamental interest of our two countries and its people, and it is not what the international community expects from us. I look forward to working with you to bring our relationship back to a healthy and stable state. President Xi has been recluse for the past 3 years of COVID. He only began traveling outside of mainland China again in July, when he came to Hong Kong for handover anniversary celebrations. Many leaders are jumping on the opportunity to meet Xi during the G20 summit. Japan has confirmed Prime Minister Fumio Kishida will hold talks with him on Thursday, while Australia's Anthony Albanese will meet Xi tomorrow. Winna Wang, HKIBC.
Here in Hong Kong, authorities are demanding answers after a protest song linked to the 2019 protests was mistaken as the national anthem at a rugby tournament in South Korea. Organizers apologized and insisted it was an honest mistake. Joanna Ho reports.
As players from Hong Kong and South Korea gathered on the field before the final, the national anthems of the two teams were due to be played. But as the SAR flag was slowly raised inside the stadium in Incheon, a protest song linked to the citywide demonstrations in 2019 was played. Sensing the grave error, organizers later amended the video broadcast on YouTube. The segment has since been replaced by a flag-raising ceremony of a previous match, while the Chinese anthem, the March of the Volunteers, was heard in the background. An apology was made over the public announcement system after the match, which Hong Kong won 19-12. The correct anthem was then used for the trophy presentation ceremony. Organizers Asia Rugby and the Korea Rugby Union both apologized. They confirmed that a recording provided by the Hong Kong team was correct and blamed the incident on a simple human error by a local junior staffer who played a song downloaded from the internet. The Hong Kong Rugby Union acknowledged the explanation but still found it unacceptable. The incident sparked a furore in Hong Kong. The SAR government published a statement at 4 a.m. to strongly deplore and oppose the playing of the protest song, which it said was linked to the independence movement.
我哋而家要求係會做一個詳細嘅調查。
Sports Minister Kevin Yeung confirmed that the Rugby Union has been told to submit an investigation report. Authorities will also consider drafting guidelines for athletes to deal with future similar situations.
是否係涉及呢？係勾結當地韓國嘅人員？
Pro-Beijing lawmakers joined in the chorus of condemnation, including Michael Luke from the Federation of Trade Unions. He urged police to step in and see whether the national security law was violated. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
The chief executive has instructed police to investigate whether anyone had conspired to breach the national anthem law. John Lee believed there was political motive behind the playing of the protest song at the rugby tournament in South Korea. But he did not say how Hong Kong authorities would enforce the law in a foreign jurisdiction. The national anthem ordinance came into force in 2020 after a series of disrespectful behavior was observed towards the national anthem. The Privacy Commissioner has served enforcement notices to 2 companies for breaches to the Personal Data Ordinance. One of them is a healthcare service provider which shared the information of over 1 million customers without their consent. Janice Lowe reports.
Acting on 2 complaints, the Privacy Commissioner launched an investigation into EC Healthcare, one of the largest medical and healthcare services providers in Hong Kong. The watchdog found that the personal data of more than 1 million customers were misused. Without the consent of customers, their information was shared between 28 subsidiary brands which belonged to EC. Commissioner Ada Chung called the practice disappointing.
EC Healthcare simply regarded all the old customers as members of EC Healthcare and put their personal data into this internal integrated system without obtaining the consent of the data subjects, and they have not even notified the data subjects.
An enforcement notice has been issued to EC, ordering the company to remedy the situation. A separate notice was served to Photomax. The leading photo finishing chain in Hong Kong was subject to a ransomware attack last year, compromising the information of nearly 620,000 customers. But following a probe, the commissioner concluded the security breach could have been avoided. Anyone who fails to comply with the commissioner's enforcement notice is subject to 2 years imprisonment and a fine of $50,000. But the watchdog admitted the penalties lack deterrent effect and will look into ways to rectify the situation. Janice Lowe, HKIBC.
The MTR says a loose metal barrier by the side of the track may have derailed the train at Yau Ma Tei Station yesterday. But emergency repairs were completed overnight and services fully resumed this morning. MTR Operations Director Tony Lee revealed that an initial probe has found the front carriage had struck a loose metal barrier before derailing. More than 30 such devices on the MTR network have since passed inspections, he added. Operating Chief Sammy Wong, meanwhile, insisted staff never forced passengers to evacuate through the tunnel. He said it was rather passengers who released the emergency ramp and walked onto the track towards Mong Kok Station. Hong Kong's COVID infections have dropped slightly. There were 6,014 new infections, down from over 6,500 cases yesterday. Around 550 were imported. Another 10 patients have died from the virus. 8 schools will need to suspend certain classes for 1 week after reporting COVID infections. Daily COVID infections on the mainland have surged past 16,000 days after the central government relaxed curbs. Residents around the country are also complaining of inconsistent or confusing practices. Chloe Feng reports.
According to media outlet Yichai, many regions across the mainland are gradually suspending mass PCR tests after the central government hinted that it was time to ease COVID rules. New rules were announced today in Fujian, Shanghai, Sanya, Shijiazhuang, and elsewhere, but many netizens were skeptical and feared it could lead to a rebound. One user found it hard to accept the sudden relaxation of rules, especially after authorities kept telling the public how deadly the disease could be. Others also criticized the inconsistent COVID practices. Some lamented at the dwindling number of testing stations, even as many places still required a negative result obtained in the past 24 hours. In Guangzhou, where cases are surging, many districts still came out of lockdown after a risk assessment system was relaxed. But some residents run into trouble leaving those districts, such as this man. Who was told by police to stay put, even though he was given permission to see a doctor outside. The confusion came as the daily cases rose to 16,072 across the country, with flashpoints in Guangdong, Henan, and Chongqing. Authorities pledged to continue fine-tuning their strategy to put the virus under control. Chloe Feng, HKIBC.
Overseas, at least 6 people were killed and more than 80 others injured after a deadly explosion in the Turkish capital of Istanbul. Authorities have labeled it a terrorist attack and arrested a woman with suspected links to the Kurdish separatist movement. Azam Khan reports.
This witness video was taken moments before the deadly blast in central Istanbul. Terrified shoppers ran for cover as a fireball appeared in the distance. Filled with tourists and locals on a Sunday afternoon, the explosion shook the bustling Istiklal Avenue, arguably the most famous retail strip in the Turkish capital. The spot is a stone throw away from the iconic Taksim Square. At least 6 people have been killed, with dozens more injured. Local media have since published a clip which purportedly showed the moment a female suspect was detained by special forces. Speaking shortly before departing for the G20 summit in Bali, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the smell of terror was in the air and that efforts to take over the nation through terrorism will not succeed. Heavy police presence remained in the capital as authorities tried to look for a motive for the bombing. The country's interior minister suggested that militants from the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, were behind the attack. The militant group, which calls for an independent Kurdish state within Turkey, has been designated a terrorist organization by both the European Union and the United States. PKK members have frequently struck the country with deadly bombings over the years. Azam Khan, HKIBC.
Hong Kong stocks have extended their winning streak as Beijing rolled out sweeping measures to prop up the battered housing market. The Hang Seng Index climbed 1.7%, while the tech index ended 1.8% higher. The rally came after the central bank issued a detailed plan to shore up liquidity in the property sector. This includes issuing credit support for debt-laden developers and relaxing down payment requirements for home buyers. Property developer Country Garden jumped by a whopping 45% and Long for 16.5%. Tech giant Alibaba ended the day flat after it did not fully disclose sales figures for its annual Single Days event. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed up 294 points. Top 10 active stocks. Tencent gained $2.20. Alibaba gained 25 cents. Tracker Fund gained 28 cents. JD.com gained $8.30. Forex trading against the Hong Kong dollar, euro at 8.05, British pound at 9.21, Australian dollar at 5.22. The London FTSE is currently up 21 points. On to the weather now. Sunny spells tomorrow. Temperatures will range between 23 and 27 degrees. Mainly cloudy with a mix of rain patches and bright periods on Wednesday. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Monday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Cheryl Yuen. Thanks for watching. Good night.